The planet had once been green and bright, filled with forests and rivers that caught the sunlight like silver glass. Now it was silent. Smoke rose from the black soil, and metal wrecks lay across the fields like the bones of some great creature. The war between humans and the alien dominion had ended only 3 days ago, but the air still carried the taste of fire and dust. Rilo walked alone through the ruins. He was a field engineer, not a soldier. His job was to find anything useful left behind before the recovery ships arrived. He carried a small pack with repair tools and a worn scanner that blinked weakly in his hand. Every step crunched against broken glass and pieces of armor. He was tired. The days after the ceasefire had felt longer than the war itself. The peace was uneasy, full of rumors that the Dominion would strike again. Still, Command had ordered him to sweep the area for survivors, weapons, or technology that could help rebuild the colonies. As he passed the remains of a burnt vehicle, his scanner gave a sharp tone. The screen flickered, showing a faint signal nearby. It was not human. The device marked it as Dominion Tech, still active, buried under debris about 40 meters ahead. Rilo hesitated. Protocol said he should report it to Command and wait for a recovery team, but that would take hours. The power reading was dropping fast. If it was a weapon, it might overload and explode. If it was a survivor, it might die before help came. Rilo sighed, tightened his gloves, and moved toward the signal. The wreck lay at the bottom of a shallow crater, surrounded by twisted metal and shattered rock. In the center of it all was a figure half covered in dirt and ash. It was tall and armored, the suit scorched black with deep cracks along its sides. Faint blue light pulsed from the gaps like a weak heartbeat. Rilo stopped at the edge of the crater. He raised his weapon just in case, though he knew it would do little if the alien was still alive and hostile. "Human rescue," he called out. "Identify yourself." No answer came. The figure remained still. He slid down the slope and knelt beside it. The armor was heavy, made of a dark alloy he had only seen in captured tech labs. The helmet was smooth, shaped like a hawk's beak, but the visor was shattered. Behind the cracks he could see pale skin, streaked with green-gray blood. The alien's chest rose and fell faintly. She was alive, but barely. Rilo took a slow breath. His mind told him to leave her and report the location. His conscience told him otherwise. He pressed the scanner to her chest plate. The readings were strange. The armor still had power but was malfunctioning, sealing itself tighter instead of releasing. It was crushing her slowly. He could see the strain on her breathing, the way her hands twitched against the dirt. He spoke again, softer this time. "You are hurt. I can help." Her eyes moved behind the cracked visor. A dim light of awareness shone there. She tried to speak, but her voice came out weak and muffled. Rilo adjusted his translator and leaned closer. The words were broken but clear enough. "Stay back. Trap. Armor will kill." Rilo frowned. The armor was rigged. He had heard rumors that Dominion command units wore suits connected to their nervous systems. If captured, the armor would destroy both itself and its wearer to protect secrets. "Then I will have to stop it first," he said quietly. He opened his pack and pulled out a compact toolkit. His fingers shook slightly as he activated the power clamp and began searching for the suit's control junction. He had dismantled many machines in his career, but never one still wrapped around a living being. The outer plates were fused in several places. He worked slowly, cutting through burnt cables and melted metal. Each movement made the armor emit a faint warning tone. The alien's body tensed as if in pain, but she did not cry out. Minutes turned to hours. The sky darkened above the crater, clouds swallowing the red sunset. Rilo ignored his hunger and the ache in his back. He followed the armor's energy lines, tracing them to a small module at the base of her spine. It pulsed with dim blue light. That was the heart of the system, the fail-safe core. He wiped sweat from his forehead and whispered to himself, "If I pull this wrong, we both die." The alien's voice came weakly through the translator. "Why, help me." "Human?" Rilo did not answer right away. He kept his focus on the module, using a micro-cutter to slice the wires one at a time. Finally, he said, "Because leaving someone to die is not what we came this far for. The war is over." She made a faint sound that could have been a laugh or a cough. "Not for me." The cutter sparked once. The module went dark. The warning tone stopped. Rilo exhaled in relief. The armor loosened slightly, enough for him to pry open the back plates. Inside, the suit was lined with thin black cables that connected directly to her skin. Some had burned through, leaving marks along her shoulders. He carefully detached each one, murmuring small reassurances, though he was not sure she could understand. When the last cable was removed, he pulled away the upper section of the armor. The weight of it made his arms shake. He placed it on the ground beside him and looked at the being he had freed. She was unlike any alien he had seen. Her features were almost human except for the faint glow in her eyes and the pattern of small scales that ran along her neck. Her breathing eased a little now that the armor no longer pressed against her chest. Relo tore open a small medical pack and sprayed coagulant over the wounds. The liquid hissed and hardened, sealing the burns. She watched him silently, her gaze steady but no longer hostile. "Name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Kale." "I am Relo." She blinked slowly, as if trying to process the sound. Then she said, "Relo, you should not be here. My armor sent a distress call. My people will come." Relo sat back on his heels. "Then I will have to finish this fast." He examined the lower part of the armor. More cables, more fused joints. It was as if the suit itself resisted him. He remembered her earlier warning about the trap. The armor might still have a secondary failsafe. Kale watched him work. Her voice was weak but steady. "Your people fear us. Why take this risk?" "Maybe I'm tired of fear," Relo said. "We have all lost too much." He continued removing the armor plates one by one. Each clank echoed across the crater. In the distance, thunder rolled over the barren land. The storm would come soon. When he reached the final piece covering her chest, he paused. "This part connects to your core system. If I remove it, the suit will shut down completely. Can you survive without it?" Kale looked at the dark sky. "If you remove it, I will live. If you leave it, it will kill me when the signal comes." Rilo nodded once. He placed his hands on the plate and pulled. The locks resisted, then snapped open with a sharp metallic crack. The chest plate fell away and the power lights across the armor faded. The faint hum that had filled the air stopped. Kale gasped, drawing her first free breath in hours. Her whole body shuddered as she lay on the ground, eyes closed, chest rising and falling. Relo sat beside her, exhausted. He looked at the pile of metal beside him, once a prison, now just dead machinery. Kyle opened her eyes again and looked at him. "You stripped me of my armor," she said in a tired voice. "No one has ever done that." Relo smiled faintly. "Then it is a first for both of us." For a moment they sat in silence while the wind carried the smell of rain. Then Kale whispered, "You do not understand what you have done. The Dominion will not forgive this. You freed one of their commanders." Relo glanced at the horizon where flashes of lightning lit the clouds. "Then we should move before they find us," he helped her sit up. She was weak, but determination burned in her eyes. As they climbed out of the crater, the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm swept across the ruined land, washing the dust from the broken armor left behind. Relo did not look back. He knew that by saving her, he had crossed a line that no order could undo. But as Kale leaned on his shoulder for support, he also knew he had done the right thing. The war had taken everything from both sides. Maybe this small act could start something new. The wind howled around them as they walked toward the distant hills, two figures against the storm, carrying the faint hope that even in the ashes of war, compassion could still survive. The storm lasted through the night. Rain fell hard against the broken land, washing away the dust of war. Relo and Kale found shelter inside the wreck of an old shuttle that lay tilted against a hillside. The shuttle's metal walls rattled in the wind, but it was dry inside. Relo lit a small heater from his pack and set it between them. The soft orange light filled the space, showing the cuts on Kale's skin and the burns that covered her arms. Without her armor, she looked smaller, less like the fearsome enemy he had been told about. Her eyes were a pale silver, bright even in the dark. She sat with her back against the wall, breathing slowly. Each breath sounded painful, but she tried not to show it. Relo knelt beside her and checked the readings on his scanner. Her body temperature was dropping. The Dominion's biology was similar to humans in many ways, but they did not handle cold well. He pulled his field jacket off and placed it over her shoulders. She hesitated before accepting it. "You are helping the enemy," she said quietly. Relo shook his head. "I am helping someone who is hurt." Kale looked away. "If my people find you, they will not care about your kindness. They will call you a traitor. Then I will deal with that later, Relo replied. For now, we need to keep you alive. He opened a small case and began mixing a healing compound. The smell was sharp, like burned metal and herbs. He had learned basic medical training during the war, but this was the first time he was treating someone not human. He tested the mixture on her skin to make sure it did not react badly, then started applying it carefully to her burns. Kyle winced but stayed still. She watched his hands move with steady care. You are not afraid of me, she said. I was, Relo answered. Until I saw you bleeding. That made her pause. She looked down at her own hands, thin and marked with scars. My people are taught that humans feel nothing for others. That you only fight to destroy. Relo gave a small smile. Your people are wrong about many things. We fight because we are afraid to lose what we love. Sometimes that makes us do terrible things, but fear is not all we are. Kale's gaze softened slightly. And what are you, Relo? He thought for a moment. I am someone who fixes broken things. Machines, engines, sometimes people. She studied him for a while before saying, Then maybe you can fix more than metal. The rain outside grew louder. The wind howled through the cracks of the shuttle and the heater's light flickered. Relo adjusted the heat and checked her pulse. It was stronger now. He leaned back, exhausted. His clothes were soaked, his hands trembling from the cold. Still, he felt a strange calmness. For the first time in weeks, he was not thinking about orders, ranks, or sides. Only survival. Kale's eyes drifted to the broken armor piled in the corner. The pieces looked lifeless, but Relo knew that some circuits might still be active. That armor, she said, voice low. It was more than a shield. It was a cage. My commanders placed a control system inside. If I refused to obey, it would send pain through my body until I submitted. You freed me from it. Relo turned to look at her. You were a prisoner in your own armor? Yes, she said. I led troops for years, but I could never disobey an order. The armor made sure of that. When I began to question the war, they saw me as weak. They locked me inside it and sent me to die in the front lines. Relo felt anger rise inside him. So they abandoned you, she nodded slowly. The Dominion does not forgive doubt. When you removed the armor, I thought I would die, but you saved me instead. Relo looked at the armor again. He realized now that every dent, every burn on it told a story. She had been fighting not only enemies, but her own chains. You said the armor sent a signal, Relo said. If they come looking for you, they will not stop until they find us. Kyle gave a weak nod. That is why you should leave. I will slow you down. I am not leaving you, Relo said firmly. She looked at him for a long time, as if searching his face for any sign of hesitation. There was none. Then we must move before dawn, she said finally. I know a place where we can hide. There's an old outpost in the Eastern Canyon. It was built by humans before the war, abandoned after the first attack. We might find supplies there, Relo nodded. Then we go at first light. He spent the rest of the night repairing the emergency radio, trying to block any trace signal that might reveal their position. Kyle rested quietly, though her sleep was uneasy. Once she murmured in her own language words that sounded like sorrow and apology. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sky was gray and cold, but clear enough for travel. Relo helped Kale stand. She was weak, but she refused to be carried. She wrapped his jacket tightly around her shoulders and took a slow breath. Outside, the world was silent again. Steam rose from the wet ground. Relo looked across the horizon, scanning for movement. Nothing. Still, he felt the tension in his chest grow stronger with each step they took away from the shuttle. They walked for hours. The path led through broken fields and over collapsed roads. Kale moved carefully, her bare feet leaving light prints in the mud. The cuts on her legs reopened at times, and Relo stopped to rewrap them with strips from his uniform. You are not trained for this, Kale said as they climbed a rocky ridge. I have been walking through war zones for 5 years, he answered. This is nothing new. She gave a faint smile. You're stubborn. I am human, he said. At the top of the ridge, they stopped to rest. From there, they could see the canyon far to the east. It looked like a scar cutting through the earth. Kale pointed toward it. The outpost is there. We should reach it by nightfall if we keep moving. Relo nodded and checked his scanner again. No signals yet, but the batteries were dying. As they continued, Kale began to speak more. She told him about her home world, a place of blue deserts and tall mountains where the air shimmered like water. She said that once her people valued honor and wisdom, but the Dominion's rise had changed everything. They had turned unity into obedience and pride into fear. I believed in them once, she said. I thought our war was for justice. Then I saw cities burn, children hiding in ruins. That was when I stopped believing. Relo listened quietly. He did not interrupt. Her words reminded him of his own home, a colony that had been destroyed in the first invasion. He had lost friends and family there, but he no longer felt the same hatred he once did. The person walking beside him was not the monster he had imagined. By the time the sun began to set, the canyon walls rose high around them. The air was cooler here and the ground dry. Relo's scanner picked up a faint metallic echo ahead. It matched human construction. There, he said, the outpost. They found the entrance half buried under rocks. The door was rusted but still intact. Relo forced it open with a crowbar. Inside was darkness and the smell of old dust. He activated a small lamp and the beam cut through the gloom. Rows of broken machines lined the walls. Some still bore the old human flag. There were supply crates, most empty, and a few working consoles covered in grime. Kale stepped inside slowly, looking around with a mix of curiosity and sadness. So this is what your people built before the war? Yes, Relo said. This was one of our first settlements on this planet. It must have been abandoned during the first attacks. He began checking the storage rooms for food and batteries. To his surprise, some of the emergency rations were still sealed. He handed one to Kyle, who examined the packet before tasting it carefully. It is strange, she said, but not bad. Relo laughed lightly. That is how we describe most of our food. For the first time, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it changed her face completely. The hardness faded, replaced by something almost peaceful. As they settled near a small power core that still worked, Rilo asked, "Do you think your people will track us here?" Kale grew serious again. "If they follow the signal, yes. But it will take time. The armor's distress beacon was weak when you removed it. Maybe we have a few days. Then we use that time to heal and plan," Relo said. She nodded slowly. "You are brave, human. Or foolish, I am not sure which." "Maybe both," he said. That night they sat beside the faint glow of the power core, sharing the last of the heater's warmth. The silence between them was not heavy this time. It felt like the calm that comes before understanding. Relo looked at the armor pieces laid out in the corner. He was beginning to see a new purpose forming in his mind. If he could repair the suit without its control systems, it might protect Kale again, not as a weapon but as freedom. Kale saw him looking and asked, "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that even broken things can be rebuilt," Rilo said. She gave him a long look and said quietly, "Then maybe there is hope for both of us." Outside, the wind swept through the canyon, carrying the sound of distant thunder. Inside the outpost, a fragile alliance was taking shape, built not from fear or orders but from a shared desire to live. The canyon was quiet in the early morning. A thin layer of mist floated between the high stone walls, and the sun had not yet touched the ground below. Inside the old outpost, Rilo woke to the faint hum of the power core. Kale was still asleep on a makeshift bed made from old blankets and a repair tarp. Rilo stretched his arms and rubbed his tired eyes. He had stayed awake most of the night repairing equipment and checking the area for any signs of pursuit. The scanners showed nothing. For now, they were safe. He walked to the corner where the broken pieces of Kale's armor were laid out. The armor looked less threatening in the daylight. It was no longer glowing or pulsing with power. Now it was just metal, cold and silent. Relo turned one of the pieces over in his hands and studied the network of cables inside. The design was advanced, but he could see the patterns of control circuits hidden beneath. Whoever built this armor had done more than create protection. They had built a way to command obedience. Kale stirred and opened her eyes. Her silver gaze met his, calm but alert. "You have not rested," she said. Relo smiled faintly. "I wanted to understand your armor. It is unlike anything I have seen." She sat up slowly, her movements careful. "It was made by the Dominion's engineers. They do not build things to protect. They build to control." Relo placed the armor piece back on the ground. "I saw the wires connected to your skin. That was not defense. That was punishment." Kyle looked down at her hands. "The armor was linked to our nervous system. Every time we disobeyed an order, it sent pain. If we spoke against command, it would silence us. Some of us thought we could bear it. Some believed loyalty was strength. I believed it once too. Her voice was calm, but there was pain hidden beneath the surface. Rilo listened without interrupting. I was a commander, she continued. I led the 12th Vanguard. I fought against your fleets for 3 years. We were told humans wanted to destroy us, that you would never stop until our world burned. I believed every word. Then one day I saw one of your colonies after our fleet attacked it. There were no soldiers, only families. Children hiding under collapsed walls. That day I knew the truth. We were not fighting for defense. We were spreading destruction. She stopped and took a slow breath. I spoke against it during a briefing. My superior ordered me to silence. When I refused, they locked the armor around me and sealed it. I became their puppet. They sent me to the front line to die. But I did not die. Rilo's hands tightened into fists. He could imagine her standing on the battlefield, trapped inside armor that punished her for her own thoughts. No one deserves that, he said. Kale gave a small, bitter smile. The Dominion does not care about deserving. It cares about power. When you removed the armor, I felt pain fade for the first time in years. You cannot imagine what that felt like. Rilo met her eyes. Maybe not. But I can understand what it means to be free again. For a while they sat in silence. The sound of the wind outside filled the space. Rilo began to check the remaining supplies. There was not much left, only a few ration packs and 2 canteens of water. They would have to find more soon. Kale stood, steadying herself against the wall. She was still weak but stronger than before. We cannot stay here forever, she said. The Dominion will send scouts. Once they realize the armor stopped transmitting, they will search for me. Rilo nodded. Then we move before nightfall. But I want to finish something first. He pointed at the armor pieces. I can rebuild some parts. The plating is strong and can protect you again, but I will remove all control systems. You will not be a prisoner to it anymore. Kyle looked at him with surprise. You would rebuild my armor after what it has done? I do not blame the metal, he said. It is only a tool. What matters is how it is used. Maybe this time it can stand for something different. For the first time since he met her, Kale's expression softened completely. You think like a creator, not a soldier, she said. Rilo shrugged lightly. Someone has to. He set to work immediately. He used his tools to cut away damaged control chips and expose circuits. Kale watched him work, sometimes helping to hold parts steady. They spoke little, but the silence between them felt steady and warm, not tense. As he worked, Rilo began to think about what would happen next. If Command learned that he had helped a Dominion officer, they would not understand. They would see her as a threat. Yet he could not bring himself to regret saving her. There was something honest about her now, something human in spirit, even if not in form. By midday, Rilo had managed to restore 2 sections of the armor, the shoulder and forearm plates. They no longer carried power lines or control chips. When Kale tried them on, they fit loosely, but they were light and flexible. It feels different, she said, moving her arm carefully. Not like before. It feels like it belongs to me. That is the idea, Rilo said with a small grin. Kale studied him for a moment. You are strange, human. Most of your kind would see me as an enemy. Yet you treat me as if I were one of your own. Rilo paused, looking up from his work. Maybe I stopped seeing sides when the war ended. Maybe I am just tired of the hate. Kale considered that. You think peace is possible? I think peace starts when someone decides not to keep fighting, Rilo said. Even if it is just one person. Later that afternoon, Rilo left the outpost to collect water from a stream at the base of the canyon. The air was cool, and the sound of running water brought him a strange sense of calm. As he filled the canteens, he noticed something unusual near the rocks. A faint line of footprints led up the path they had come from. He crouched and touched the marks. They were fresh. Someone or something had followed them. Rilo's heart raced. He quickly filled the last canteen and hurried back to the outpost. Kale met him at the door. She saw his expression and understood at once. They are close, she said. Yes, Rilo replied. We need to move now. Kale grabbed the pieces of armor and helped Rilo pack the supplies. She moved with quiet urgency, her movements precise despite her weakness. Within minutes they left the outpost and began climbing toward a narrow passage in the canyon wall. As they moved, a distant sound echoed through the valley. It was the hum of Dominion drones, small fast machines used for tracking and recovery. They are scanning the area, Kyle said, her voice low. If they find us, they will not show mercy. Rilo looked at her. Then we stay ahead of them. They climbed through the rocks, following a narrow trail that led higher into the canyon. The drones passed overhead, their red sensors sweeping the ground below. Rilo held his breath as one beam passed dangerously close. Kale placed her hand on his arm, steadying him. Her touch was cold but calm. The drones moved on, unaware of their presence. When the sound faded, Rilo exhaled in relief. They continued climbing until they reached a high ridge overlooking the canyon. From there, they could see the drones circling the old outpost. One of them landed near the entrance. Kyle watched with narrowed eyes. They are collecting the armor's remains, she said. Once they see it has been altered, they will know I am alive. Rilo turned to her. Then we cannot go back. We head east toward the mountains. The terrain will hide us, Kyle nodded. There are caves there. If we reach them, we can rest and plan our next move. They began the long walk along the ridge. The ground was uneven, but Kale's strength was returning. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky red and gold. As they walked, Rilo asked, "What will you do if we make it out of this?" Kale was silent for a moment. "I do not know," she said finally. "My people will see me as a traitor. Yours may never trust me, but I still believe I can do something good. Maybe stop the next war before it begins." Rilo nodded slowly. "Then I will help you." She glanced at him with surprise. "You would risk your life for that?" He smiled faintly. "I already have." Kale looked at him for a long time, then gave a small nod. "Then you are a fool, Rilo. But maybe the galaxy needs more fools like you." They walked until night fell. The stars began to appear one by one, bright against the dark sky. For a brief moment, the world seemed peaceful again. As they set up a small camp beneath an overhang of rock, Kale looked at the armor pieces beside her and then at Rilo. "You stripped away my armor," she said softly. "But what you really removed was the part of me that had forgotten how to feel." Rilo looked into the fire they had built and said, "Then maybe you can help me remember what it means to hope." In the quiet of the night, two former enemies sat together beneath the stars, both carrying the scars of a long war, both beginning to see a truth greater than victory or defeat, the truth that freedom was not found in strength or armor, but in understanding and trust. The night passed quietly, but Rilo could not sleep. The stars above the canyon were bright and cold, and the sound of the wind echoed between the cliffs. He sat beside the small campfire and kept watch while Kale rested. Every few minutes he looked toward the dark horizon, half expecting to see the red lights of Dominion drones returning. Kyle slept lightly, her breathing even. She no longer looked like the soldier who had fallen from the sky wrapped in steel. Without the armor, she seemed younger, almost human. Her face, marked by faint lines of scales, was peaceful for the first time since he had met her. When dawn came, the light touched the rocks with gold. Kyle opened her eyes slowly and pushed herself up. Rilo handed her a ration pack and a canteen of water. She took them with quiet gratitude. "We need to reach the mountains before noon," she said. "Once the sun rises high, the drones will fly again. They can track body heat from the air." Rilo packed the supplies and checked his scanner. "We move as soon as you are ready." They began climbing down from the ridge, following a narrow trail that led to the open plains. The ground was rough and dry, scattered with the remains of machines from past battles. Broken turrets, burnt metal, and old helmets lay half buried in the sand. The land carried the memory of war. Rilo walked ahead, keeping his eyes on the scanner. Kale followed close behind. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist. Sweat rolled down Rilo's neck, but he did not stop. Every time he looked back, Kale met his gaze with steady determination. By midday, the ground began to rise again. The path led toward dark hills that marked the start of the mountain range. From there, they could find the caves Kale had spoken of. But before they reached the first slope, the scanner beeped sharply. Rilo stopped and checked the screen. "Movement ahead," he said. "About 200 meters." Kyle crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the terrain. "Show me." He turned the scanner toward her. A cluster of small signals flickered on the display. "Dominion scouts," she said. "5 of them. They are not drones. They are soldiers." Rilo frowned. "If they find us, we cannot outrun them." Kyle's eyes narrowed. Then we do not let them find us. She studied the land around them. Nearby, a large vehicle lay overturned, half buried in sand. Its metal hull was big enough to hide behind. Kale pointed to it. There. We take cover and wait for them to pass. They moved quickly, keeping low as they crossed the open ground. Once behind the wreck, they crouched in silence. The air grew tense. Soon the sound of footsteps reached them. Dominion soldiers moved across the plain, their armor dark and gleaming in the sunlight. They carried energy rifles that hummed softly. Relo counted 5 figures. They were scanning the ground with small devices, probably tracking the signal from Kale's broken armor. One of the soldiers stopped and knelt, touching the dirt. Relo's pulse quickened. He could see the faint mark of their footprints leading toward the hills. Kale leaned close and whispered, "If they see us, we must move fast. You run for the rocks. I will hold them." Relo shook his head. "No, you can barely stand. We stay together." Kale looked at him firmly. "If they catch us both, everything we have done will mean nothing." Before he could reply, one of the soldiers turned sharply in their direction. His scanner beeped. He raised his rifle. "Run," Kale said. Relo grabbed his pack and sprinted toward the hills. Kale rose to her feet, picking up a broken rifle from the wreck beside her. She fired a short burst. The weapon sputtered, but it hit one soldier squarely in the chest. Sparks flew as the Dominion troops scattered for cover. Energy blasts cut through the air. The sound echoed across the plain. Relo dove behind a rock, heart pounding. He looked back to see Kale moving with quick precision, her movements graceful despite her injuries. She threw the empty rifle aside and picked up a metal rod, using it to strike down one soldier who had come too close. Relo wanted to go back, but Kale shouted, "Go! I will follow." He forced himself to move. He climbed the slope toward the mountains, hearing the fight continue behind him. The air was thick with dust and smoke. After several minutes, the sound of gunfire stopped. Relo turned around. Kyle was limping toward him, her body covered with dust but alive. 2 of the soldiers lay still on the ground, while the others had retreated. He ran to her side. "Are you hurt?" "Only tired," she said, catching her breath. "We must keep moving before they return." They reached the first line of rocks as the sun dipped behind the hills. The light turned red across the sky. Ahead of them, the mountains rose like walls of stone, sharp and high. Relo felt a mix of fear and relief. The mountains meant safety, but also isolation. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler. They found a narrow path that wound through tall cliffs. It led to a small cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. Rilo pushed the plants aside and stepped inside. The air was dry and cool, and the space was wide enough to rest. Kyle sat down against the wall, breathing heavily. "We are safe for now," she said. Relo knelt beside her and checked her wounds. She had a cut on her arm from the fight, but it was not deep. He cleaned it with a small packet from his kit and wrapped it tightly. Kyle watched him work. "You risked your life for me again," she said. He smiled faintly. "I am getting used to it." She looked around the cave, her eyes soft in the dim light. "This place is old. It feels untouched by war." Relo leaned back against the wall. Maybe it was never found by either side. Maybe this is what peace looks like. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the faint whistle of wind outside. Kyle broke the silence first. "You asked me once what I would do if I survived. I have been thinking about that." Relo turned to her. "And?" "I want to stop the Dominion," she said. "Not with weapons, but with truth. I want to show them what we have seen. If I can reach one of their command stations, I can send a message to their soldiers. They must know what our leaders are doing." Relo nodded slowly. "That sounds dangerous." "All good things are," Kyle said with a faint smile. "But I cannot do it alone." He looked at her and said simply, "Then I will go with you." Kyle shook her head. "You have already risked enough. The Dominion will hunt you if they know you helped me." "They already will," Relo said. "So we finish what we started." Kyle studied him for a moment and then said quietly, You remind me of what I once believed about my own people. That courage can come from compassion. Night fell outside, and the cave filled with the faint light of their small fire. The wind outside grew stronger, carrying the distant sound of thunder. Relo looked at the armor pieces that lay beside them. If we reach the station, we might need protection. I can finish rebuilding the rest of your armor. It will not have weapons, but it will keep you safe. Kyle nodded. Then we worked tonight. They spent hours shaping the metal with small tools and a heat cutter. Rilo removed every trace of the Dominion's control systems. He replaced the circuits with simpler human ones, lighter and easier to maintain. The new armor would not be powerful, but it would belong to her and no one else. When the work was done, Kale lifted one of the pieces and studied it. It was rough but strong. She placed it over her arm and smiled. "It feels right," she said. "For the first time, this armor feels like mine." Relo smiled back. "Then it is finished." Kale looked at him, her silver eyes glowing softly in the firelight. "You do not realize what you have done, Relo. You gave me back my choice. That is more than freedom. That is life." He met her gaze and said, "You gave me back something too. You made me believe we can still change the future." Outside, lightning flashed across the sky. The sound rolled through the mountains like distant drums. The fire flickered, throwing long shadows across the walls. Kale stood and looked toward the mouth of the cave. "Tomorrow we go north," she said. "There is a Dominion relay tower there. If we reach it, I can send my message to every soldier who still listens. Maybe then the war will truly end." Relo rose beside her. "Then tomorrow we march through fire if we must." Kyle smiled faintly. "You humans have a strange way of saying things, but I like it." They sat together until the fire burned low. The storm outside grew stronger, wind roaring through the canyons like a living thing. Yet inside the cave there was calm. Two weary souls, one human and one alien, sat side by side, bound not by command or duty, but by a shared hope that even in a broken galaxy, peace could still be born. The night passed quietly in the cave. Outside, the wind howled against the mountain cliffs, but inside, the fire had burned low and steady, giving warmth to the two figures. Kale had slept more soundly than she had in years. Relo had kept watch, his eyes scanning the faint darkness for any sign of danger. By dawn, both of them felt stronger. Rilo checked the supplies. The rations were nearly finished, and the water was enough for only a few more days. They would have to move quickly. Kale stretched, testing her legs and back. The new armor he had rebuilt covered her shoulders and arms, light but strong. She flexed her fingers inside the gauntlets and felt the freedom that came from carrying no control systems. "Only protection. We should leave before the patrols begin again," Kale said. Relo nodded and gathered the supplies. "The relay tower is to the north. We can follow the ridge, but the path will be difficult. There are cliffs and narrow passes." Kale studied the route carefully. "I have seen the way from above once. It is dangerous, but it will keep us hidden from drones. We need to move in the shadows of the mountains." They left the cave at first light. The air was cold and crisp and the sky was pale blue. The mountains rose ahead like silent guardians, their peaks shrouded in mist. They climbed carefully, using the rocks for balance. Every step required attention. The ground was uneven, and loose stones threatened to slip beneath their feet. As they walked, Kale spoke quietly about her past. She told Relo about her training in the Dominion fleet, the strict drills and the lessons in obedience that she had once thought honorable. She described the first time she questioned orders and how fear had punished her before she had the courage to survive. Relo listened in silence. He had learned much about her life already, but hearing her speak freely made the story real. She was no longer just an enemy commander. She was a survivor, someone who had endured control, fear, and betrayal, yet still carried the desire to do what was right. By mid-morning, they reached a narrow pass that overlooked a deep valley. Below them, the landscape stretched endlessly. The sun reflected off broken buildings, a reminder of the war that had scarred the planet. Kale pointed to the valley floor. "The relay tower is just beyond that ridge. It is guarded but lightly, mostly automated defenses and a few soldiers who maintain the system. Relo scanned the terrain. We can go around the front, but it will take longer. We could use the old service tunnels that run under the ridge. They may be collapsed in places, but they will keep us hidden. Kyle nodded. Then we take the tunnels. The last thing we want is to be seen before we reach the tower. They descended into the narrow entrance of a tunnel hidden behind boulders. The air inside was cool and damp. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small puddles on the uneven floor. Relo held his flashlight steady while Kyle moved beside him. The path was tight. They had to crawl under sections where rocks had fallen and step carefully over cracks in the stone. Despite the difficulty, they moved faster than Relo had expected. Kale's knowledge of the terrain made her careful but decisive. After an hour of slow progress, they emerged on the other side of the ridge, hidden from view. The relay tower rose in the distance, a metal structure surrounded by tall fences and small guard posts. Energy lights flickered faintly along its sides, and a few Dominion soldiers moved quietly around the base. "We are close," Kale whispered. "We need to reach the tower before the sun gets higher. Drones will be back soon." Relo and Kyle moved silently across the rocks, keeping low and using shadows to conceal themselves. Every few steps, Kyle signaled him to stop and wait while she watched for patrols. Their movements were careful, like a dance perfected over years of survival. When they reached the tower's perimeter, Kale pulled out a small device from her pack. "I know the access code for the maintenance hatch," she said. "It is guarded electronically, but the panel will open for me." She approached the hatch and connected the device. The panel clicked and a small door opened. Relo helped her lift it carefully. The tunnel inside was dark, but it led directly to the interior of the tower. Once inside, they moved quickly. Kale led him past control panels and maintenance rooms, stopping only when her scanner indicated movement outside. The tower was almost empty, with only automated systems running. At last, they reached the main communication console. Kale stepped forward and began inputting codes. Her hands moved quickly, precise and calm. Relo watched as the lights on the console flickered and the screens came to life. "We are connected," she whispered. "I can reach the Dominion network and send my message to every soldier who is listening." Relo stood beside her. "Are you sure this will work?" Kale glanced at him. "It will not stop everything, but it will reach those who still have the courage to question orders. That is a start." She typed rapidly, sending encrypted messages to Dominion stations across the sector. The screens filled with confirmation alerts. Soldiers would receive her voice, her words, her truth. Relo could see it in her eyes, determination and hope. Suddenly, the scanner beeped. Outside, Relo saw the faint red glow of drones approaching. Dominion reinforcements were arriving faster than they had anticipated. Kale's eyes narrowed. "We must finish quickly." Relo helped her protect the console, watching the entry points. The drones landed outside, their mechanical legs clanking against the ground. A few soldiers disembarked, scanning for movement. Kyle finished sending the last messages and removed her device. "Done," she said. "The truth is out. Now we must leave before they realize what has happened." Relo nodded. "Then we go." They retraced their steps through the maintenance tunnel. Kale's armor clinked lightly with every step, but it gave her confidence. Relo carried the remaining supplies. They moved as silently as possible, exiting the tunnel and heading toward a narrow ridge that would take them out of view. The Dominion soldiers were searching the area now, their voices sharp and commands hurried. Drones flew overhead, scanning for heat signatures. Kyle and Relo ran along the ridge, using the terrain to keep hidden. When a drone passed directly above them, Kale flattened herself against the rocks, dragging Relo down beside her. They waited until it moved on, then continued. Finally, they reached a small plateau, safe for the moment. They stopped to catch their breath. Kale looked at Relo and smiled faintly. "We made it." The message is sent. The war may not end immediately, but at least the truth is out. Relo nodded. "You risked everything." "I am glad I was here." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did not just help me. You gave me something more. You showed me that trust is possible even after everything." Relo felt a warmth he had not experienced in years. "And you reminded me that hope is worth fighting for." They sat together on the plateau, looking out over the mountains. The sun was setting, casting gold and red across the rocks. Below them, the valley was quiet, but the world beyond was changing. Messages had been sent. Soldiers across the sector would now hear the truth. Orders would be questioned, and some would choose to defy commands for the first time in their lives. Kyle lifted one of the pieces of her rebuilt armor. She looked at it carefully. It is lighter, simpler, but strong. It belongs to me now. It will protect, not control. Rilo smiled. Then it is truly yours, she turned to him. Rilo, you have done more than I could have imagined. You stripped me of what held me prisoner and gave me back life. Not everyone could do that. He shook his head. We all have choices. Sometimes the hardest choice is to help someone when it is easier to look away. I'm glad I chose this path. The two of them sat in the fading light side by side, knowing that the days ahead would not be easy. Dominion forces would continue to hunt, challenges would remain, and danger would never fully disappear. Yet for the first time in a long while, they were not just surviving. They were moving forward armed with trust, courage, and the knowledge that freedom was more powerful than any weapon. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Rilo looked at Kale. We may be tired and the path will be hard, but we can face it together. Kale nodded. Together, she said. And maybe, just maybe, we can help others see that there is a better way. The mountains were silent around them, holding their secret and their hope. And for Rilo and Kale, the war was not just a story of battles and machines anymore. It was a story of courage, of trust, and of the human spirit that could shine even through the darkest armor. They stayed until darkness fell completely, then moved on quietly, the rebuilt armor clinking lightly, carrying not just protection but a promise. The promise that even in a broken world, choices mattered, and freedom could be forged from the smallest acts of bravery. The night air was cool, the sky full of stars, and the path ahead uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, both felt ready to face whatever came next.